At the height of her power, Fan Bingbing did not look like someone who could disappear. She looked untouchable. She was China's most photographed actress, a red carpet phenomenon, a beauty icon whose face could sell films, fashion, and fantasy all at once. At Cannes, she did not just attend, she dominated. In Chinese entertainment, her name had long moved beyond celebrity and into something closer to mythology. The actress who could turn visibility itself into power. That is what made the shock feel so unreal. One moment she was everywhere, premieres, endorsements, global fashion headlines, blockbuster appearances. The next, silence. No normal explanation, no clear timeline, no easy answer. When someone that famous suddenly vanishes, the disappearance becomes bigger than gossip. It becomes a public rupture. Then the rumors hardened into something darker. Reports began circling around so-called yin-yang contracts, hidden payments, and possible tax evasion tied to the way huge acting fees were being structured. The glamorous image that had once made Fan Bingbing look larger than life now began to work against her, because the higher a star rises, the more violent the fall feels when the first crack appears. What terrified people was not only the scandal itself, it was the vacuum that followed. She did not just become controversial, she became absent. In an industry built on constant exposure, absence feels louder than confession. And for months, the silence around Fan Bingbing turned into its own spectacle. Was she under investigation? Was she being punished? Was this the collapse of one actress, or a warning shot aimed at the entire Chinese entertainment industry? That is why this story begins here, with disappearance instead of fame. Because the real hook is not simply that Fan Bingbing became one of China's biggest stars. The hook is that she became so powerful, so visible, so symbolic, that when she fell, the whole culture seemed to freeze and stare at the empty space where she used to be. Before we talk about the girl from Shandong, before the rise, before the empire, we have to start with the question that still haunts her legacy. How does a woman build herself into a goddess of modern celebrity, and then vanish almost overnight? In Fan Bingbing's story, success is not the mystery. The mystery is how quickly success can turn into silence. Long before Fan Bingbing became a symbol of glamour, controversy, and power, she was just a girl growing up between Qingdao and Yantai in Shandong, inside a family that was much closer to art and discipline than people might expect from a future celebrity icon. Her parents were involved in cultural work and performance-related fields, which meant she did not grow up seeing the arts as something distant or impossible. Performance, image, and presentation were already part of the atmosphere around her. That matters because stars like Fan Bingbing are often described later as if they appeared fully formed out of beauty alone. But beauty was never the full story. From the beginning, there was structure around her, taste around her, and a sense that performance was not fantasy. It was a possible path. Even so, possibility is not the same as destiny. Fan Bingbing still had to become visible, and that requires a different kind of ambition. She trained, studied, and moved toward the entertainment world with the kind of determination that often gets erased once fame rewrites someone's image into something effortless. But nothing about a career like hers begins effortlessly. Before the gowns, the flashes, and the international attention, there was a young woman learning how to hold herself in front of a camera, how to carry presence, how to understand that in entertainment, being seen is a skill as much as a gift. That early formation matters because it explains something crucial about Fan Bingbing later. She did not simply become famous by accident. She knew how to build an image, how to sharpen it, and how to stand inside it without blinking. And yet there is something almost ironic about this stage of her life when seen from the future. The girl from Shandong was moving toward celebrity with discipline, training, and ambition, but no one looking at her then could have predicted the scale of the myth she would one day become. She was not born as Fan Bingbing the icon. She became her step by step in an industry that rewards persistence almost as much as beauty. That is why this part matters. It reminds us that before she became a national sensation and later an international symbol, she was still someone being shaped by family, by region, by education, by will. The scandal years make more sense when you understand this foundation, because they show just how far she climbed before the fall had enough height to become catastrophic. Fan Bingbing did not become a queen overnight. In fact, the first version of her fame came with a built-in limitation. She was visible, memorable, and undeniably beautiful, but she was not yet the center. When My Fair Princess exploded across Asia, it changed her life, but not in the clean, triumphant way people often imagine. She played Jin Suo, a supporting role in a story dominated by bigger names and louder attention. That kind of breakthrough is both a gift and a trap. It puts your face in front of millions, but it also risks freezing you in someone else's shadow. And for a while, that was the challenge in Fan Bingbing's story. Everyone knew her face, but not everyone believed she would become more than the beautiful supporting girl from a hit costume drama. What changed her trajectory was not one sudden reinvention, but a long, deliberate refusal to stay small. She kept working, kept appearing, kept moving from television into film, from familiar beauty into calculated visibility. Fan Bingbing understood something many stars learned too late. Being famous is not enough if you do not control the shape of your fame. So she began building more than a career. She began building an image with scale. The performances mattered, but so did the styling, the public presence, the sense of grandeur surrounding her. She stopped looking like someone trying to survive the industry and started looking like someone preparing to dominate it. That transformation is one of the reasons her rise felt so powerful. She was not simply being chosen by the machine, she was actively teaching the machine how to frame her. Then the frame expanded beyond television and beyond China's domestic fame cycle. Fan Bingbing became one of the rare Chinese stars whose visibility translated internationally, not only through acting, but through fashion, festivals, branding, and sheer red carpet command. Can helped turn her into something larger than a successful actress. It turned her into a spectacle of presence. She did not walk a carpet like someone attending an event. She walked it like someone who understood that global celebrity is partly performance, partly image architecture, and partly pure nerve. By that point, she was no longer just a former breakout actress from My Fair Princess. She had become a symbol of scale, ambition, and control in modern Chinese entertainment. That is why this stage of her story matters so much. Fan Bingbing's rise was not passive. It was strategic, relentless, and highly visual. She did not just escape being remembered as a supporting actress, she transformed herself into the kind of star who made supporting role feel like a distant origin myth. And when someone builds themselves that high, the power of the ascent becomes inseparable from the violence of whatever eventually brings them down. By the time Fan Bingbing reached her peak, she was no longer simply an actress with a successful career. She had turned herself into an empire. In Chinese entertainment, that kind of transformation matters because it changes the scale of a person's influence. A famous actress can headline films, dominate television ratings, and attract endorsements. But Fan Bingbing became something bigger than that. She became a system of visibility. Her image moved across cinema, fashion, beauty, luxury branding, magazine culture, and international festival circuits with a level of precision that made her feel less like a celebrity and more like a symbol. She was not only being photographed, she was being positioned. And the more often the world saw her, the more she came to represent a certain kind of Chinese star power, extravagant, glamorous, disciplined, and impossible to overlook. This was the era when she stopped looking like someone inside the entertainment industry and started looking like someone above it. Fan Bingbing's red carpet appearances became events in themselves. Her gowns were discussed like headlines, her beauty was treated as an institution, and her presence at global festivals gave her a kind of international legitimacy few Chinese actresses were able to command at the same level. What made this so remarkable was that she was not simply exporting film roles, she was exporting image. She understood that in the modern fame economy, power does not belong only to the most talented person in a room. It belongs to the person who can turn attention into architecture. Fan Bingbing did that almost perfectly. She built a persona that looked bigger than scandal, bigger than competition, even bigger than the films themselves. And that is exactly why the stakes became so enormous. When someone rises that high, they stop being judged only as an individual. They become a symbol of a whole era, a whole industry, even a whole national fantasy about fame and success. Fan Bingbing's empire was not fragile in the way ordinary celebrity is fragile. It looked reinforced by money, influence, beauty, and global visibility, which is why the eventual collapse felt so shocking. A fall from that height is never just personal, it sends a message. Before the scandal ever exploded, before the disappearance, before the apology, Fan Bingbing had already become too large to fail quietly. That is what this stage of her story proves. She did not just build a career, she built a throne. And once you understand how high that throne stood, you understand why the fall that followed felt less like gossip and more like an earthquake. Then came the scandal that did what years of competition, gossip, and public scrutiny never could. It shattered the illusion that Fan Bingbing was untouchable. In 2018, reports about so-called yin-yang contracts exploded across Chinese media, suggesting that parts of an actor's compensation could be hidden through dual agreements in order to reduce taxable income. For most celebrities, that kind of story would already be dangerous. For Fan Bingbing, it was catastrophic because she was not just another actress caught in controversy. She was the face of excess, scale, and elite glamour in Chinese entertainment. The richer the image, the harsher the backlash when money became the center of the scandal. And then came the silence. Fan Bingbing did not simply deny the story and move on. She seemed to vanish. Public appearances stopped. Promotions disappeared. The woman who had once mastered visibility became defined by absence, and that absence made the scandal feel even bigger than the documents behind it. As the months went on, the mystery turned into dread. The public was no longer only asking whether she had done something wrong. They were asking what was happening to her, where she was, and whether the silence itself was part of a larger punishment. In Chinese celebrity culture, disappearance is never just disappearance. It carries the weight of warning, and Fan Bingbing's disappearance felt like a message directed far beyond one person. When authorities eventually announced the results, the numbers were staggering. She had been ordered to pay an enormous sum in back taxes, fines, and penalties. The apology that followed was equally dramatic. In it, she wrote with the tone of someone who understood that this was not simply a financial penalty. It was a moral and symbolic collapse. The same woman who had once walked red carpets like royalty was now speaking in the language of shame, gratitude, and survival. The goddess image did not merely crack, it was publicly brought down to earth. What makes this chapter so powerful is that the scandal did not only punish Fan Bingbing as an individual, it transformed what she represented. Before 2018, she had stood for glamour, dominance, and near-mythic celebrity. After 2018, she also stood for something else: the vulnerability of even the most powerful star inside a system willing to make an example out of someone at the very top. That is why the fall felt so seismic. It was not only about tax law, contracts, or one actress's choices. It was about watching a figure who had come to symbolize a whole era of spectacle suddenly become a cautionary tale. In that sense, the scandal broke more than her image. It broke the fantasy that sheer fame could protect anyone forever. And once that fantasy was gone, people no longer looked at Fan Bingbing the same way. They looked at her not just as a queen who had fallen, but as proof that the higher the throne, the more violent the message when the throne is taken away. After the scandal, Fan Bingbing was no longer the same kind of star, even when she returned to public view. That is the part people often misunderstand about survival in celebrity culture. Coming back is not the same as restoring what was lost. A face can reappear, a name can trend again, a red carpet can welcome you back, but the image that once existed before the fall never returns in exactly the same form. And that is what makes Fan Bingbing's post-scandal story so haunting. She did not vanish forever. She remained recognizable, beautiful, and globally discussed. Yet the version of her that once represented total control had been permanently altered. The woman who came back was still famous, but now she carried the memory of disappearance with her. That memory changed the way the world looked at her. Before 2018, Fan Bingbing's glamour felt almost invincible. After 2018, glamour alone was no longer enough to erase the shadow attached to her name. When she appeared again, at international events, in magazines, in carefully watched public moments, the question surrounding her was no longer simply, "What is she wearing?" or "How stunning does she look?" It became something deeper and more complicated. What remains after a star has been publicly broken? In some ways, that gave her image a new dimension. She was no longer just a goddess of spectacle. She became a figure of aftermath, a woman who had already been pulled down from the throne and who now had to exist in the world without the illusion of being untouchable. But maybe that is what makes the ending of Fan Bingbing's story more interesting than a simple comeback narrative. She did not return as a clean redemption arc. She returned as a reminder that celebrity at the highest level is never only about beauty, power, and influence. It is also about fragility, control, and what happens when one symbolic fall is meant to send a message to everyone watching. Fan Bingbing survived that message. She did not erase it, and she did not fully outrun it, but she lived beyond it. And that is what makes her story linger. Not because she remained perfect, but because she continued after perfection had already been stripped away. In the end, the real legacy of Fan Bingbing may not be the empire she built or the scandal that broke it. It may be the fact that even after the throne collapsed, people still could not stop looking at the woman who was left standing in the dust.